On a stormy November night in 1971, a mysterious man boarded a plane with nothing but a briefcase and a plan. Hours later, he vanished into the darkness with $200,000, leaving behind the greatest unsolved crime in FBI history. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the man who disappeared without a trace. It was the evening of November 24, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving. Seattle, Tacoma Airport was alive with the usual holiday rush, families hurrying to catch flights, businessmen carrying briefcases, children tugging on their parents' coats. In the middle of it all, a man walked calmly through the terminal, dressed in a dark suit, white shirt, black tie, and polished shoes. He carried a briefcase and a folded raincoat. To anyone watching, he looked like just another traveler heading home for the holidays. At the ticket counter, he gave the name Dan Cooper, paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, and boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305, a Boeing 727 scheduled for a short trip to Portland. He took seat 8TC, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette. The passengers around him hardly noticed him, an unremarkable man blending into the background. But as the plane gained altitude, Cooper leaned toward the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, and handed her a small folded note. She tucked it into her pocket, assuming it was someone's phone number. Cooper spoke in a calm, low voice. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Florence's hands trembled as she opened it. In neat block letters, the message explained that Cooper had an explosive device in his briefcase. When she looked at him in disbelief, he gently cracked it open. Inside were red cylinders, wires, and a battery pack. His instructions were clear and chilling. He wanted $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck ready when they landed in Seattle. What followed was unlike any hijacking the FBI had ever seen. Cooper did not shout. He did not panic. He was oddly polite, even reassuring the flight attendants that everything would be fine as long as his demands were met. The passengers sat quietly, unaware of the storm brewing around them. The pilots radioed ground control, and soon the FBI and local authorities scrambled into action. It was the first time in U.S. history that a commercial aircraft was being hijacked for ransom. For the next several hours, while the plane circled the Seattle area to allow time for preparations, Cooper sat calmly in his seat, sipping his drink, smoking his cigarettes, and watching the crew with steady, unblinking eyes. When the plane finally touched down, the exchange was made. The passengers were released safely in exchange for the money and the parachutes. To everyone watching from the outside, it looked like the nightmare might be ending. But for Cooper, the plan was only halfway complete. He ordered the remaining crew to keep flying south, toward Mexico City, under very specific conditions: a low altitude of 10,000 feet, flaps partially extended, landing gear down, and the rear staircase deployed in flight. The pilots objected. It was dangerous, nearly impossible, but Cooper remained firm. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again, carrying only 5 people: the 3 pilots, 1 flight attendant, and the mysterious hijacker. The night sky was brutal. Winds whipped across the plane, rain hammered down, and the temperature outside dropped below freezing. Somewhere around 8:00 p.m., the cockpit noticed a sudden shift in cabin pressure. Warning lights blinked as the rear stairway was lowered. A rush of cold air swept through the fuselage. When the crew looked back, Cooper was gone. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in American history. Agents, soldiers, and local police swarmed the dense forests and mountains of southwest Washington. Helicopters searched from above, ground teams scoured rivers, and paratroopers were dropped to simulate the jump. But there was no trace of Cooper. No parachute, no clothing, no body. The man had simply vanished into the night. The press got wind of the story, and one newspaper mistakenly reported his alias as D.B. Cooper instead of Dan Cooper. The name stuck, turning him into a legend almost overnight. Americans were fascinated by the mystery man who leapt from a jetliner into a storm and escaped with $200,000. For years, theories swirled. Some believed he never survived the jump, that he was swallowed by the icy Columbia River or buried deep in the forest. Others argued that Cooper was an expert, someone with military parachute training who planned his escape down to the last detail. The FBI investigated over 800 suspects. Ex-military men, airline employees, and career criminals were all questioned. None could be definitively tied to the crime. Then in 1980, a startling discovery revived the mystery. A young boy camping with his family along the Columbia River found 3 bundles of decaying $20 bills buried in the sand. The serial numbers matched the ransom money. Nearly $6,000 had surfaced, but the rest was still missing. Investigators wondered, had Cooper drowned and the money drifted downstream? Or had he planted the cash as a false trail? Over time, several names emerged as strong suspects. Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Green Beret who hijacked a plane in nearly the same fashion just months later, was high on the list, but differences in description ruled him out. Kenneth Christensen, a former Northwest Orient Flight attendant, was accused by some of his own family, but there was never hard evidence. William Gossett, a World War II veteran and experienced paratrooper, confessed privately to friends and relatives that he was Cooper, but no proof ever surfaced. Dozens of others claimed to be the mysterious hijacker, yet every lead ended the same way, with unanswered questions. By 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the case. The Bureau admitted that all credible leads had been exhausted. D.B. Cooper remained, and still remains, the only hijacker in U.S. history to successfully get away with air piracy. But closing the file didn't end the fascination. Cooper's story became part of American folklore, inspiring books, documentaries, movies, and endless internet debates. Did he die that night in the storm? Did he live quietly under a new identity, spending his money carefully so as not to raise suspicion? Was he a desperate man, or a brilliant outlaw who slipped right through the cracks of history? What is certain is that his crime forever changed air travel. Airlines introduced metal detectors, stricter boarding protocols, and aircraft modifications that made mid-air stairway jumps impossible. Cooper forced an entire industry to rethink security, proving that one man with a briefcase and a plan could shake the nation. Today, half a century later, his name still sparks curiosity. Witnesses who saw him describe him as calm, polite, and composed, traits that make him even more enigmatic. He never harmed a passenger, never raised his voice, and yet orchestrated one of the boldest heists of the 20th century. In the end, his true identity remains hidden in the shadows. D.B. Cooper walked into an airport one rainy November evening and disappeared into legend. His story is not just about crime, but about mystery, about the limits of investigation, and about the strange allure of the unknown. Somewhere between the roar of the engines, the rush of wind, and the darkness of the forest below, he vanished. Whether he lived or died, whether he was a mastermind or a doomed gambler, no one will ever know, and that uncertainty is what keeps the world captivated. Even now, people whisper his name with a mix of awe and disbelief. D.B. Cooper, the man who stole $200,000, jumped into the night, and left the FBI chasing shadows. A man who proved that sometimes the greatest crime isn't the one committed, but the mystery left behind.